Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 54 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got two Nutanix folks with me. Jirah, do you guys call yourselves something special? Like, for example, this weekend, I had on my Citrix shirt, and some guy recognized me as a Citrix employee, former Citrix employee. Do you guys have like an affectionate name for yourselves, don't you?
Yeah, man, we say Newton, which makes you curious. What do y'all say at XenTegra?
XenTegrites.
Okay, well, there you go. Boom. XenTegrians? No?
Yeah, XenTegrians. Yeah, we pretty much steal from Citrix all their good marketing stuff, not the bad marketing stuff, the good marketing stuff. And they have had a lot of good stuff.
I was going to say that implies the existence of bad stuff.
Look, it's like I use this one all the time. It's like auto racing, specifically NASCAR in my case, dirt track racing, what have you. If you're not constantly tweaking, you're not really trying. Because the track's going to change, the environment's going to change, what have you. And there's been probably half the tweaks I've ever done made it worse and half of them made it better. But the truth is your environment is changing around you. So you have to be doing something. If not, somebody else is going to catch you and pass you.
I've just realized that we don't do enough joint events together around dirt track. We need to fix that.
Oh, man, I would love it.
That'd be fun.
I love sliding sideways. It's been a long time, though, really. Well, okay, so that was the voice of Jirah Cox. Jirah is our subject matter expert on all things Nutanix. If I ever get in a world where I'm talking to someone Nutanix and I'm trying to validate myself, I talk about the podcast Jirah does with me, and they say, "Oh, you must be somebody." Then I just associate with Jirah.
You should talk to people that are less easily impressed. But
oh man, they're pretty impressed. Also, you guys heard Ben Rogers. If you've listened to any of our other podcasts, the Citrix one, Ben used to be a sales engineer over there. Now he's over at Nutanix. Ben's a former customer. Used him as a reference the other day with a joint account that we're both working on now. And, I think Ben saw the vision of delivered compute in a low compute fashion. In other words, server hosted desktops at some point starts to bleed into VDI. The world of hyperconverged and Nutanix shows up there. But that's Ben Rogers, former Citrix guy, former customer, now Nutanix. What'd you call it? What was your affectionate name for yourself?
We're Newtons.
Newtons.
I haven't quite reached the level of Newton yet. I'm called a newbie. So I think until you complete your first year here, you're a newbie, and then after that, you can assume the name of Newton.
With the acronym FNG, right?
There you go. Yeah, I'm a friendly new guy.
Friendly.
I would like to think, and I don't know, Jirah might agree or disagree with this. I would like to think I've shortened the learning curve a little bit. It's just what's been interesting coming from Citrix to Nutanix is Citrix had a wide portfolio that, man, as a sales engineer, you had to know a little bit of the whole portfolio from end to end. Nutanix is similar. You have the core product, which is the HCI product, but that product can spider out and do so many things. So learning the core has been one thing, but learning the 5,000 things the core can do, like we're going to talk about today, has been the other. So, Andy, I'm glad to be on another podcast with you. Excited to be hanging out with you guys today. Ready to learn a bunch. And thank you for allowing me to continue my journey with you guys.
So, we kind of told Ben coming into this, we wanted his feedback on what we do and have him chime in. It just so happens Harvey's not here today, so probably play a larger role for now until he continues to evolve. But I am going to go to Ben real quick and ask a question. Ben, do you remember the first time we talked about hyperconverge and what you thought about my ideas that's where you should be heading at that moment and how things have changed?
Yeah, I remember the conversation. What's really wild about my journey here at Nutanix so far is that, I was a 3-tier guy, and the economics of managing that infrastructure can be interesting according to how you purchase that 3-tier. It's not always just one purchase. So you have to work on when do the things depreciate out? When does it make sense? So, I never crossed the bridge of having to go HCI. It's something that now I'm on this side, I would have definitely done, but I would have done it more to create the environment and the platform that would then allow me to spider out to the cloud services. So this whole concept of private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, man, Nutanix really has embraced that. They're creating the platform that will allow you to service your on-prem private cloud workloads, but then also extend those out and not have to have employees learn a whole new set of tools, man. So that's been real interesting for me. And looking on my past experience, I definitely could see where I would have embraced that, along with continuing to run Citrix on top of it because of the goodness of the desktop that I got there. And so, yeah, man, I'm learning a whole bunch, and really a neat time to be in IT. And we're in one of those moments where this is a paradigm shift of bringing in cloud, and how does that work for every organization, because they're all going to be faced with it before too long.
Well, it's interesting. We'll use that to segue into the topic today. We have, you have the core of hyperconverged, which is really cloud fundamentals in your data center. And then you have things like additional features like we're going to talk about today with files, and then the big scary security world that needs to show up in everything, but files specifically. And then finally, the third thing, which Ben brought up, which is now the elasticity of multiple data centers and having that ubiquitous layer between all of them, which is going back to, which is all of it, right? Files and the core operating system, the storage operating system, and all of that being prepared to go left, go right, go straight, go backwards if you need to. And that's, where Nutanix has really aligned itself, not with necessarily being the cloud, but being an enabler of whatever your cloud strategy is. And I was at a Nutanix meeting last week in New York, and I brought up to the team presenting, right? The minute you help customers understand it's not the cloud, it's clouds. And it could really be clouds within one single organization like Microsoft, but it could be your data center, their data center, data centers, and the ability to be elastic and ubiquitous layer in between all of that. The minute somebody shakes their head, yeah, I agree, it's clouds, not cloud, all of a sudden this layer that Nutanix brings to the equation becomes very applicable to all conversations.
Yeah, I usually say it a little differently in my customer meetings. I'll ask, like, who's your cloud provider? And whatever they say, Azure, AWS, I'll say, actually, trick question, you are your company's cloud provider, right? Those are tools in your arsenal, right? Yeah. But your company's cloud can or might include all of those things, or none, whatever the right option is, right? Yeah. Choices for your company, right? But yeah, having that optionality, that control, that agility to say things can start one place, move other places, yeah, absolutely invaluable.
And my argument there is people that the only people that want you to think it's the cloud is one of these hyperscaler players who are trying to get you to go all in on their solution. And at that point, you might be able to think of it as one big cloud. But the truth is that doesn't work for probably anybody. And
no, we get far too much mileage out of like a single word there, right? Because when you think about everything from people trying to do like mainframe AIX in the cloud to like serverless functions, you're talking about very, very different kinds of clouds in there, right? And then containers in the middle, VMs in the middle, and we're barely even talking about the same technologies, but we wrap them all in this giant word doing too much work called cloud.
Right.
It's been interesting, Andy, since I've been here. One of the things that they really concentrate on is workload. Where do you need your workload to reside? And so, part of what we have to do when we go in is kind of get customers to wrap their heads around, you've got all these servers and all these services that you're, spinning out to the company, but what is really your workload, and where do you need to concentrate those efforts? And those are different. I was in commercial at Citrix. Now I'm over here at enterprise. One of the things that shocked me dealing in the enterprise space is a lot of enterprise has legacy, and they can't really, get rid of that legacy for different reasons. But they're looking at ways to get that legacy spin out of private on-prem to public. And so it's been interesting to see how Nutanix can help some of the larger customers that have these legacy apps that they can't unfold their business from. How do they preserve that and make that go forward?
And for me, there's two ways to look at that. There's legacy apps that you're currently still using, and there's legacy apps that you can't retire for archival reasons. And in both cases, you might approach them slightly different, but having that ubiquitous, and I'll probably say it way too many times in this podcast, having that layer that allows you to have high performance compute and storage oriented low performance compute is super valuable versus trying to buy that 3-tier thing that fits it all. All right, so the blog that we're looking at is Nutanix Files, episode 4.1, a security story. And we're going to have Jirah walk us through this, and Ben chime in as to why it mattered to him as a CIO along the way. Jirah, who's the author of this one? I can't pronounce it.
So Angelo Luciani runs our community programs. So that includes like the NTC program for field evangelists, as well as the community site here called .next, not to be confused with .next, the conference.
And he jumps into the blog talking about unstructured data. I guess, and that really means the database would be structured, or legacy database would be structured. And now unstructured data would be files, and even tables and things that have, well, I guess not tables, but things that are just random data. How does that help me define unstructured data?
Yeah, so commonly used for to describe things like file shares, right, on a NAS. So whether it's SMB, NFS, Windows file shares, Windows file servers, VMs, physical, unstructured data, basically meaning that it's like non-database, non-big data. There's not a schema that describes it. It's the structure is whatever users feel like on that day, right? Users can go create folder hierarchies, right, and that becomes the de facto organization, if you will, of the data.
So in 1999, I was the Wintel systems admin for a company located here in the Charlotte area. We had 54 gigs of user data files, group shares and things like that. And my Unix administrator was after me all the time to get that under control. I wonder how much they have today.
I would say, yeah, 54 gigs in 99. Yeah, it was like probably rivaling like the hard drive in my PC.
Yeah. Yeah, that was crazy to think.
We're probably using, 10, 20 times as many spindles and costing, I don't know, 100 times as much.
Yeah. Well, and then for this conversation, it's really about securing, not necessarily managing and reducing that size. We go into some things. We got 3 bullets here. Jirah, you want to hit these bullets, and then we'll come back to Ben and ask him put on his CIO hat and tell us why that matters.
Yeah, totally. So a couple of data points shared for like table setting in the article around history and sort of growth of ransomware. Not going to surprise anybody listening to this, right? From 2015, which is like not quite dawn of ransomware, but early days of ransomware, through last year, 57x growth in ransomware, growing to a global $20 billion revenue stream, which is terrifying. A really even more terrifying one, right? Around even people that pay ransoms for ransomware, only 65% recover their data. And then perhaps let's keep escalating the terror here. The worst one, perhaps, average impact of a ransomware event can be 21 days of downtime, which is, that would be crippling to almost any company I can think of.
Do you think that was a company that said, frick it, I'm not paying the ransom, or is that a company that just took that long to figure it out?
I mean, geez, sometimes even the debate around which one are we going to be can take that long.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ben, if you're a CIO again, what does this mean to you, that these concerns? I mean, first of all, I have my normal ransomware conversation. Ransomware to me has really just been a result primarily of all this bad stuff existed. Now they had, cryptocurrency and ways to get paid. Ben, if you're the CIO today versus when you were 3-4 years ago, how much more scared are you? Were you scared then?
Oh, I was definitely scared then. I mean, in healthcare, this was hitting healthcare, before I made the transition over to being a sales engineer. These numbers are real. And, this bottom statistic that Jirah introduced with the 21 days of downtime, he's absolutely right. I mean, for where I was at in healthcare, that would have destroyed the business. They couldn't have been down 21 days. I mean, you're talking, neurosurgery stuff. So that it's an emergency world. The other thing, we've seen clients in the past, and Andy, you and I have worked on, a couple of projects together on this, where ransomware not only wiped out their production environment, but it went ahead and wiped out the backup environment where there was nothing left, and the client had to start from zero, from scratch. Right. And so these are all real world scenarios, and what keeps people up at night. And so I'm glad to see that our company is addressing some of this and bringing some real world solutions to this, because these statistics are not made up. They're real, and they're staggering, and they're growing. I mean, this is not going away. The bad guys are getting smarter, and the good guys they always seem to me to be in reactive mode and trying to flip the script, and being proactive, which is what some of these tools are going to do, is a great thing. So, I applaud. But yeah, it scared me then, scares me now. How you handle it, make sure you got your backups going, and some of these techniques that Jirah's going to talk about built into our systems.
And it highlights here in the very next statement that this is all targeted at unstructured data, where those bad guys can get their hooks in and wait for the right moment to be called upon, execute.
Yeah, now let's talk about I do have a comment on the unstructured data. Unstructured data, people think about shares and stuff like that, but there are some database systems that use image files. And if that application was written before the days of Blob and some of this object storage that's out now, you could have a database engine that is pointing to flat files. We called it flat file back in the day, not unstructured data. But that was a worry for me because I was like, okay, you have these images that are being produced by the database engine, but they're not necessarily stored in the database engine or the storage that's doing the database engine. They're being stored out here on some kind of UNC path that the database is aware of and can call. But that, to me, I considered that unstructured data. And that was one of the big things that I was scared of, is that you would have a ransomware attack in those storage silos that might not necessarily hit your database engines. But guess what? When a doctor goes and pulls up that image and it's sitting there going, we can't find whack, UNC path, that's some of the things that scared me. So when we talk about unstructured data, just don't assume that it's shares. These could be legacy apps that have pointers in them that call out to unstructured data.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Ben.
So Jirah, walk us through this next little section, talking a little bit about what Nutanix has done up till now to help with unstructured data as part of its overarching operating system, storage operating system, which, by the way, runs on multiple hypervisors, Acropolis hypervisor being one, VMware being one. But what has Nutanix done up to this point?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, everything we're going to talk about comes over and above, right? Some of the basics that we've had for a long, long time, right? Around antivirus integration for, like, pick your favorite antivirus scanning engine that can then come over and scan our shares. We can, like, notify it when new files get written, notify it when people want to do a file access. You can, of course, block undesirable file extensions, right? You keep people from storing, in that 54 gig mountain of data in 1999, right? No MP3 collections, right? No ripped CDs, as well as, of course, data snapshots, right? So, of course, fully agree with Ben, right? You definitely want to have your backups in order, test them regularly, monitor for change rates, hopefully have them on some kind of an immutable platform. But we also ideally want to help you never need them either, right? If we can recover from a snapshot on the primary storage, that's going to be faster than having to haul that back from a backup tier as well. So snapshots also are in play. These are all just things that files, I think, either launched with or got very, very quickly after. Last year, we also launched Data Lens, right, which does cloud-based analytics of the data itself, looking for things like ransomware signatures, primarily for that launch, file extension based, which is, we'll talk about, is definitely something. It might be slightly imperfect or not all encompassing, right? We'll get into more advanced detection we've got now. But yeah, ransomware detection powered by Data Lens in the cloud, looking at file extensions to help identify things more quickly so that we can alert on them and you can react to them faster.
Now, is that you jumping into the 4.1 behavior of Data Lens? Or
we sure can, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that.
So with 4.1 recent files update, this lets us then now also do even deeper analysis, so we can actually look into the data streams themselves and detect, hey, this file, even if the extension is not changed, actually has changed, and now it is exhibiting indicators that probably indicate ransomware, right? So you can alert on that even when the file extension itself doesn't change. As well as some behavior analysis, right, around, hey, this is the wrong time of day for this many files to be getting touched. This is the wrong, perhaps unusual user activity, right, for this account to be touching.
Sorry, guys, I'd lose you.
You're fine. We're here.
I moved my desk. I sat down, and right then you stopped speaking. I was like, oh, I wonder if I messed things up.
I can keep going. So rolling in through configurable remediation policies, right? So, like, once we detect this, how do we want to respond, right? And this is always a little bit of a cultural decision for every customer, but usually I'd recommend take a stronger stance, right? Go ahead and block a session, terminate sessions, cut a user off from perhaps SMB access, or nullify those sessions, block the IP address, let them call the help desk, apologize to them, say, sorry, what you were doing looked like ransomware, versus take a softer stance and, like, alert someone, but maybe they're not looking at their email inbox for the next hour. don't wait for a human to respond to that threat. Be a little bit more proactive. If it does, bruise some feelings, better to prevent something that might have the indicators of malware versus have a softer stance.
And Jirah, is this all Nutanix development in the product, or are these things that you bought through other companies and added?
I think this is all 100% organic.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because that just shows that even though, I'll say it, file storage and it is not the sexiest thing. However, security around file storage is, one of the hottest topics out there. It just shows that you have a platform, but you're investing in extending that platform. That again goes back to cloud use cases, hybrid cloud use cases, private data centers, semi-private data centers. The same feature set's going to work no matter where you're landing.
I think,
100%, right? It's part of the enhanced value of the platform, right? Not trying to be a single, one trick pony around like just desktops or just, minimally viable file shares, but like, what do we really need to run this for a rich enterprise, right? With security controls that respond to real world situations.
Yeah. Ben, you were going to comment?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think that's so crucial about this article is one of the first things it says is that some of these exploits are getting past firewalls and some of the first layer defenses. So, somebody gets an email and it gets through the email server. I mean, our users might not be aware that these things are happening. So having some of these additional remediation processes in the background, like, are we seeing 10,000 files being encrypted at midnight on a Friday night when nobody's in the office? That's something that, CIOs and IT directors are going to get a grip on because they might not have a lens on it. They might be enjoying their weekend or whatever. So again, when you read the article in totality, you'll realize that it's just a combination of multiple things that creates a secure environment. And this is just one cog in that wheel. I'm glad we're developing it because things do get past the firewalls. Things do get past, email security. And so having this safety net at the storage level is awesome.
Totally. I mean, Andy, you mentioned how in your mind, like the rise of ransomware tied in with like the method of payment, right? So cryptocurrency kind of fosters ransomware. I think it's totally valid. I think it's one of like 8 different things that all sort of enabled the rise of ransomware, right? Strong encryption, right? Strong encryption being able to be offloaded to like a consumer grade CPU, right? Because it's all done on the user's workstation, right? But they have a great CPU that can do strong ciphers. Encryption in general being a good thing, right? That we can do strong encryption like for end users, because all that ransomware is doing, right, is just automating things the user has permission to do. The user getting too much visibility to too much data, right? 20 years ago, in 1999, most of that user's data, even if there was a 54 gig, aggregate file share for users, there was way more data on people's desktops, right? But encrypting someone's desktop was kind of a less valuable target. That desktop was more likely to just flat up die anyway, right? Like workstations were just a thing. They were always in the shop back then. So as a result, data migrated to the data center, right? So all the data moved into user shares, home shares, application shares, team shares on the NAS. So then that put kind of more eggs in a more valuable basket, right? So ransomware said, hey, I can hit more effectively. And then, of course, just speed of the modern CPU, right? So, like, it kind of a perfect storm. That ransomware was almost like, in some ways, it's almost a perfect example for bad automation. We talk about, it's definitely automation, start to finish, right, with lots of resilient error handling, but orchestration, automation at the desktop level, nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, this next section talks about write once, read many, which I think comes from the S3 world. You can clarify that for me if you would. I will point out the acronym of WORM, which in security terms has historically to me mean like a bad thing. Now we're talking about WORM also being reused again as an acronym to mean a good thing. Jirah, what is write once, read many? And am I correct that came out of the S3 concept, or am I wrong?
I bet it probably predated that, right? Because I can think of a couple of like backup applications, even back in like the tape days,
okay,
that would have operated in like, honestly, most tape backups were sort of a write once, read many construct. But yeah, it going back to like a security model, like what if we can take away from a vast set of users and apply that sort of minimal permissions needed to do their job. What if that includes deleting files, right? Maybe you need to be able to create files, but not delete files, or change files, which is what ransomware wants to do. So taking that away, if that's viable and a good option for your company, then it's a great problem solver, right? To say, maybe I can change a file for 10 minutes after I create it, but after that, maybe it gets locked and now it can't be deleted, maybe by anybody, or maybe only by like an administrator, so that I can have more secure accounts that files could be deleted if they needed to. Kind of differentiating here between, enterprise mode versus like a true like legal compliance mode, right? We're kind of familiar with the concept of putting like a mailbox in a legal hold fashion, so I can do the same thing with data, right? Is it allowed to delete any data, or is it just really hard to delete any data?
And maybe this is where I'm naive here. So when it comes to the ransomware stuff, are we taking the data, letting it stay there and encrypting it, or are we deleting it and making the accessibility to get back to it encrypted? What do ransomware folks typically do?
So usually, most ransomware is going to take a given file, like a Word document, Andy's favorite Word document, create another file that's going to be Andy's favorite Word document, maybe .docx, maybe .docx bad extension here. But either way, creating a separate encrypted file and then deleting the original, or maybe in some cases doing an in-place overwrite of that same file, such that the data is overwritten and only the encrypted data remains. In either path, this kind of a functionality to do a write once, read many, the either the update or the delete gets blocked, right? The user, right? Bad actor ransomware with the user's credentials can't either do the delete or can't do the overwrite to effectively destroy that data, right? And remove your copy of it so that only their encrypted copy of it remains.
Okay. Ben, thoughts on this technique? Were you guys using this where you came from, or not necessarily this version? Obviously, Nutanix didn't have it at the time. You didn't have Nutanix, but were you accomplishing this any other way? Or, and I guess tape backup would be one of the ways we've done this through the years.
Yeah. I mean, backing up to disk is one way that we did it. We would we went from tape to disk. And then I think one comment I like to make about this particular part of the article was this idea of immutable backup. The backup not being able to be changed. I've seen a lot of customers as they go, we're going to do on-prem backups for so many days, or private cloud backups. Let me correct my verbiage here. Private cloud backups for so many days, but then we want to tier those backups off to cloud. And a lot of people want those backups when they're tiered off the cloud to be immutable, where they cannot be changed. And that's the start of a DRBCP scenario. So it's been interesting to me to come to this side of the fence and hear people go, when my backups go from private cloud to public cloud, we want them to be warm, staged, immutable, no changes done to them. And we want to make sure that no changes can be done to them. That's where this has come up a lot for me in my conversations with my customers today.
Well, Ben, I like you went down further in the article and brought up immutable. This is just a smarter way to do immutable storage, right? Am I looking at that correctly?
My opinion, yes. Now, I'll let Jirah, he's the expert here. But yeah, if I was sitting in another CIO role where I was responsible for the operations and, more importantly, getting the operations back up with a fast RPO, fast RTO, this would be definitely something that I would be interested in. Or if I was going to make that break where now I'm going to take my healthcare data, which is HIPAA protected, and I need to ensure that, and put it in a public area, even though it's still my tenant and I should have access to it, I would want some kind of protection to ensure that could not be changed once it broke that barrier.
Yeah, in my mind, immutability and worm really has a lot of overlap on the Venn diagram, right? That ability to say this file set can't be touched, can't be changed until it ages out and hits some defined retention threshold, right? So 100%, just great label for same capability.
So this next section talks about multiple file server client networks. Jirah, you want to help us understand what this means?
Totally. So some customers, let's say you're a service provider with a bunch of tenants that each have their own network that can't talk to one another. In the before times, right, on like files 4.0 and prior, you would have to deploy a different files cluster, right? Because Nutanix files is a cluster of virtual machines. you deploy a different cluster into each of those different networks for each of those different tenants, right? Which is totally fine, very valid, easy to size for. But one objection we would sometimes hear is like, well, that's a whole lot of compute, a lot of CPU, larger number of virtual machines given, right? If I have a small tenant, I still have to deploy like 3 of these virtual machines to run the file services for that tenant. So this is more of a shared compute, but still network isolation approach to say I can run one cluster of file server VMs, one Nutanix files deployment that I can then give different legs on the network, right, into multiple tenant environments. And then even further restrict it to say that if I'm coming from network A, I can only see shares A. Network B can only see shares B, and it's still a shared compute environment, right? It's running one set of FSVMs, file server VMs, to run all of those different environments, but each tenant only sees their data.
Yeah. No, it makes tons of sense. You would want this shared storage environment, but you would want to make sure people only saw what they had.
It really helps you
had access to. They could only get to, not
right.
saw, but get access to what they, at the network layer, talk to what they have access to.
Which is the same as it was before, but now we're helping you run leaner as a service provider, right? Or get more bang for your buck out of the hardware you're going to run these VMs on, right? You leave more resources free to do other workloads.
What was it called in the not Nutanix, the Novell world, where we hid shares? We could hide shares from people, and then Microsoft adopted that maybe 2012 timeframe. What was that called? Do you remember?
Access-based enumeration.
Access-based enumeration. There you go, man.
Like it's because I remember I've worked in places where that like wasn't turned on, and you could see 500 directories under the share, but you can only touch 2 of them, right? And when you tried to open any of the other ones, you got an error, right? And access-based enumeration, which we also support, it's not really a security feature; it's more of the obscurity feature, right? Says if I can only open 2 of them, only show me those 2, not show me the 500.
Yeah. Well, and then at this point, I mean, real security, especially if you ask the network guys, and they're not wrong in this case, starts at the network level. If you can't get there, then you have secured it.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. The last paragraph talks about those intent on unleashing malicious activities will continue to find strategies. We just got to keep blocking them where we can and think proactively about where they're going next. When somebody wants to do harm, they will find ways, but we need to turn off their basic ways they can get to us.
Totally, right? I mean, defense in depth applies to literally everything here, right? From, if at all possible, rewrite your URLs, scan your incoming email, block your outbound DNS so that you can't even do lookups to get to, bad places. But then let's say the executable is running on one of your desktops, then if they can't get there at like the layer 3 level, that's a good step. If they can get there, but they can't enumerate, that's another good step. If they can see the file, but then don't have permissions to the directory, again, least possible permissions for a user role, then that's a good thing. But then if they can still see and touch the file, well, then if it doesn't really need to be a file that allows updates, well, then worm as well. So we've got a whole bunch of layers in that threat model.
Yeah. Well, I think Ben hit on this a minute ago or in the beginning that it's lots of different approaches all coming together to form a solution. And then I keep harping, ubiquitously across multiple platforms, no matter where it is, in your cloud, in your data center, your partner data center, and your colo, it's all clouds at that point.
It's funny, Andy, I'll jump on a funny bandwagon here with you as we kind of get to the end of this. One of the things I get asked all the time coming to Nutanix is, oh, I thought HCI was dead, or I thought you guys were a storage company. A lot of customers think of us as a storage company or HCI. What I look at them is, man, HCI might be dead, storage might be dead, but what's more important than anything is data management. And that's really where some of these tools come into play is, we can run it on the platform, but the platform doesn't have to be physical. It can be virtual. It can be, in third-party data centers. We're looking at tools that will allow you to manage that data set and ensure that that data set is operational and restorable if needed in multiple fashions. I want to comment on one part of this article that we kind of glazed over is when I was in a managerial role and I was responsible for these things, I selected the NIST cybersecurity framework to model my framework around as far as, being able to remediate problems and how do I go and make sure the environment is healthy and stays healthy. And part of this article addresses that, man. And they are looking at how NIST does things and trying to make sure that we can accomplish those things. And that's, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And if, organizations are looking to meet those goals, and that's what they've set out to do from an IT level and a business level, our products really fall into that because we're following those models and we're making sure that those models are being met in our product set. And so, man, I was pleased to see that when I read this today, that we had included a little bit of a blurb of we can help you get to a NIST framework platform. And that's man, that says a lot, and so I didn't want to glaze over that. Another question I have, we sell our base product. Does this technology come with our base product, or does this require additional licensing? Educate me as, what could have been a future customer, now an employee trying to understand our licensing. Where does this fit in our product set, and how do our customers take advantage of this?
So Ben, real quick before you go there, though, the fact that, you have a NIST standard that you go by, that's important. I hope most companies have something that is their target, to go by. The fact that you brought up, oh crap, lost my thought here. The people think hyperconverge is dead. Hyperconverge is not dead. It is happening whether you know it or not, and it's obscured from you. That's the thing. I mean, it's such the status quo behind the scenes that you think you're getting something as a service, but it's really there. But if you're building out your own, or you're planning your own company's destiny, you better realize it's still there and not think that you don't need it, because it only enables those things you're going to do next, but you got to have it before you get there.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of hyperconvergence in some of these big data center, some of these big cloud providers. It's just, customers, they want to challenge you. And so when I come back to, we're a hyperconverged company, we're a storage company, we can do all those things, but more importantly, we're looking at data management and how can we make sure your data is available to you. And if something happens to it, how quickly can you get back? The RPO and RTO is always interesting conversations to have with IT leadership.
Yeah. So Jirah, who gets it? Who owns it? Who owns Files 4.1 that we've been talking about the last hour?
Yeah, if you're running a Nutanix cluster, virtually every cluster under the sun is licensed for its first TIB, which is like a terabyte, but it's base 2 versus base 10. But really close things. We were, engineers going to engineer. You can definitely try this out today on your cluster. When you click to deploy files in Prism, right, it's an automated procedure for you. It just asks you for like some IP addresses for what it can assign there. It'll actually pull down the latest files at that time. So you can just tell it deploy straight on to 4.1.
Yeah. And Jirah, does Files follow your write frequency scenarios? In other words, if I've got a file that's in Files within Nutanix, is it going to be written twice, written 3 times? The data associated with it, is that how it works?
Yep. Yeah. Files falls under that, RF2 or RF3 user configurable data management model for write all pieces of data twice or 3 times for resiliency. And then also to probably what you're also asking Andy about data tiering, right? So hottest data lives in the hottest storage in the cluster, right? So whether that's SSD versus HDD or NVMe versus SSD, or even now like Optane versus NVMe, whatever it is, hottest data can float to the hottest tier of storage.
And then Metro clusters, we're going to have it redundant somewhere else. And then we're also possibly going to back it up offsite.
And we
can replicate it. We can back it up. We can recover it. All of the above.
Yeah.
I've had some conversations where customers talking about tiering in these different cloud providers, because guess what? That exists there, and you're paying for, speed and availability. So some customers have come to us and said, how can you help us provide a better model for data management in our cloud providers?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you want to kind of control that destiny too. You don't just want to rely on whatever services they're offering, because then they control the narrative at that point. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it. It's been a Monday. Right? I snuck in a dental appointment, which by the time you add that to a Monday, I don't know what happened to the day, but it's over, and we got 4 more days for the week, and I'm sure you guys have plenty to do. So I'm going to let you go.
Cool. Pleasure talking to y'all as always.
Always fun. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. Thanks, Jirah.
Thank y'all.